Pedro López was known as the Monster of the Andes, and he was one of the deadliest serial killers the world has ever seen. Yet his name is far less known than other members of this list, like Ted Bundy or Jeffrey Dahmer. Born in Colombia in 1948, López grew up in extreme poverty. His childhood was marked by violence. His father was killed in a civil war, and his mother was abusive. When he was 8 years old, she threw him out of the house. He survived on the streets, where he was taken in by a man who repeatedly assaulted him. This cycle of abuse shaped the predator he would become. By the 1970s, López was drifting through South America. He developed a terrifying pattern, targeting young girls, often between the ages of 8 and 12. He lured them away with small gifts and then strangled them. Because he kept moving between Colombia, Ecuador, and Peru, police struggled to connect the disappearances. In 1980, López was finally caught in Ecuador after attempting to abduct a young girl. Once in custody, he stunned investigators by calmly confessing to killing more than 300 children. He even led police to a mass grave of over 50 victims. Authorities confirmed at least 100 murders, but the true number may be far higher. What horrified people most wasn't only the scale of his crimes, but his lack of remorse. He told police he saw himself as an angel of death, sent to cleanse society. López was convicted in Ecuador and sentenced to just 16 years, the maximum penalty at the time. After serving 14 years, he was released in 1998, deported to Colombia, and briefly institutionalized. Shockingly, he was released again. His whereabouts today remain unknown. Jeffrey Dahmer was born in 1960 in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. From a young age, he was a quiet and withdrawn child. His parents' marriage was unstable, and by the time he was a teenager, Dahmer showed troubling behavior. He collected dead animals, dissected them, and showed an unsettling fascination with the bones. Teachers noted his isolation, but few realized the darkness that would follow. Dahmer committed his first murder in 1978, shortly after graduating high school. He picked up a hitchhiker named Stephen Hicks and brought him back to his home. When Hicks tried to leave, Dahmer bludgeoned him and later dismembered the body. For nearly a decade after, Dahmer didn't kill again, but his urges never went away. In 1987, he resumed killing. Over the next several years, he lured men and boys to his apartment with promises of money, alcohol, and companionship. Once inside, he drugged them, strangled them, and often kept their bodies for days. Police later discovered that Dahmer dismembered many of his victims, preserved body parts, and in some cases, practiced cannibalism. Neighbors in his Milwaukee apartment building sometimes complained of foul smells and strange noises, but their concerns were brushed off. In May of 1991, police encountered a disturbing situation when neighbors found a 14-year-old boy wandering the streets, injured and disoriented. Dahmer managed to convince officers that the boy was his 19-year-old lover who had simply had too much to drink. Despite protests from bystanders, the police actually returned the boy to Dahmer's apartment. Hours later, Dahmer killed him. Just 2 months later, another intended victim escaped Dahmer's apartment and flagged down 2 police officers. What they found shocked the world. Human remains in the refrigerator, a severed head in the freezer, and photographs documenting the crimes. Dahmer confessed to killing 17 victims between 1978 and 1991. In 1992, he was sentenced to 15 consecutive life terms. He survived just 2 years in prison before being beaten to death by another inmate in 1994. Ted Bundy was born in 1946 in Burlington, Vermont, and raised by his grandparents before later moving with his mother in Washington. On the surface, Bundy appeared intelligent, charming, and ambitious. He studied law, volunteered in political campaigns, and was well liked by many who knew him. But behind that facade, Bundy harbored violent fantasies that escalated into one of the most notorious killing sprees in American history. Bundy began abducting women in the early 1970s, often approaching them in public places with a fake injury, carrying books in a sling or pretending his arm was broken. Once he gained their trust, he would lure them to his car, where he attacked. His victims were typically young women with long hair, parted down the middle, a detail that later emerged as a chilling pattern. Over the years, Bundy confessed to killing more than 30 women across multiple states, though the true number remains unknown. His methods were brutal, involving kidnapping, assault, and murder, and he often revisited crime scenes. Bundy was first arrested in 1975 for attempted kidnapping, but he repeatedly escaped custody. In 1977, he broke out of jail in Colorado, eventually making his way to Florida. There, he committed his most notorious crime, the attack on Florida State University's Chi Omega sorority house in January 1978, leaving 2 women dead and several others badly injured. Just weeks later, Bundy abducted and murdered his final confirmed victim, 12-year-old Kimberly Leach. He was arrested shortly after and put on trial in Florida. Bundy's trial was one of the first to be nationally televised, drawing massive media attention. In 1979, he was convicted of murder and sentenced to death. After years of appeals, Ted Bundy was executed in the electric chair in January 1989. Andrei Chikatilo was born in 1936 in a Ukrainian village devastated by famine. His early years were shaped by hunger, poverty, and fear. Stories of cannibalism spread through his community, and his father was later captured during World War II. Chikatilo grew up timid, bullied, and ashamed of his physical weaknesses. On the surface, he became a teacher and family man, but beneath that facade, darker fixations were forming. His first known murder happened in 1978 when he lured a 9-year-old girl into the woods near his home. The killing went unsolved, and for years afterwards, he hunted in secrecy. By the 1980s, train and bus stations across the Soviet Union became his stalking grounds. He targeted children, teenagers, and young women, offering food, money, or a place to rest before attacking. Chikatilo's crimes were especially brutal. Victims were stabbed or strangled, and the savagery left police struggling to comprehend what kind of person they were chasing. Soviet authorities were under pressure to solve the murders, but for years their investigations went nowhere. At one point, another man was wrongly convicted and executed, while Chikatilo remained free. By the late 1980s, the body count had soared past 50. Police finally placed him under surveillance after noticing his suspicious behavior near a train station. In 1990, he was arrested, and once confronted with evidence, Chikatilo confessed in chilling detail. He admitted to killing 56 people, though investigators suspect the number could be even higher. His trial in 1992 became infamous for his bizarre behavior. At times he shouted, ranted, or exposed himself in court. He was eventually convicted of 52 murders and sentenced to death. In 1994, Andrei Chikatilo was executed by a single gunshot to the head. Richard Ramirez was born in 1960 in El Paso, Texas. His childhood was shaped by violence, abuse, and exposure to disturbing influences. As a teenager, he began experimenting with drugs and developed a fascination with Satanism and the occult. By his early 20s, Ramirez had moved to California, where his criminal behavior escalated from theft to acts of extreme violence. In 1984, he committed his first known murder. What followed was a wave of crimes that terrorized California throughout 1984 and 1985. Ramirez became infamous for breaking into homes at night, attacking men, women, and children without warning. He used guns, knives, or blunt force, and in several cases, the crimes included sexual violence. His lack of a consistent pattern made him unpredictable and even more terrifying. The press gave him the nickname the Night Stalker. His crimes weren't confined to one neighborhood. He struck across Los Angeles and beyond, leaving fear in every community he targeted. Ramirez often scrawled pentagrams at crime scenes and told his victims to swear allegiance to Satan, adding a chilling layer of ritual to his attacks. The turning point came in August 1985. A fingerprint left in a stolen car connected him to the crimes. Police released his photographs to the public, and days later, Ramirez was recognized on the streets of East Los Angeles. A group of civilians chased him down and held him until police arrived. His trial drew huge attention, with Ramirez showing no remorse. He flashed satanic symbols, shouted obscenities, and seemed to embrace his notoriety. In 1989, he was convicted of 13 murders and numerous other charges, receiving the death penalty. Richard Ramirez spent the rest of his life on death row at San Quentin, where he died of natural causes in 2013. Ed Gein was born in 1906 in Plainfield, Wisconsin. He grew up in a strict, isolated household under the control of his mother, Augusta, who preached about sin, immorality, and the evils of women. His father was an alcoholic, and Gein and his brother Henry lived in a lonely, repressed childhood on a family farm. When his mother died in 1945, Ed was left almost completely alone, and his strange behavior soon escalated. By the early 1950s, Gein began visiting local cemeteries at night. He dug up recently buried bodies, taking skin and bones back to his farmhouse. Investigators later learned he crafted grotesque items from these remains: lampshades, masks, and clothing stitched from human skin. These discoveries shocked the world and would later inspire horror films like Psycho, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and Silence of the Lambs. In 1984, Gein killed tavern owner Mary Hogan. 3 years later, in 1957, hardware store owner Bernice Worden disappeared. Police traced the last sales receipt at her store to Gein and searched his farm. Inside, they found Worden's body, along with the gruesome collection of human remains Gein had been assembling for years. The revelations horrified the small farming community. Gein admitted to killing 2 women and to numerous acts of grave robbing, though investigators suspected he might have done more. Declared mentally unfit for trial, Gein was committed to a psychiatric institution. Years later, in 1968, he was found guilty but legally insane, and he remained in custody for the rest of his life. He died in 1984 at a state hospital. Albert Fish was born in Washington, D.C. in 1870. His childhood was filled with instability. His father died when he was young, and his mother, unable to care for him, placed him in an orphanage. There, Fish endured regular beatings. Abuse he later claimed gave him a twisted association between pain and pleasure. As he grew older, his behavior became increasingly unsettling, marked by disturbing obsessions and harmful behavior. By adulthood, Fish was a husband and father, but his outwardly normal life hid disturbing compulsions. He placed classified ads to lure his victims, often under the pretense of offering work or running errands. Over the years, he claimed to have targeted dozens of young people across several states. Many of the cases linked to him remain unsolved, but the details that did emerge were enough to horrify the public. One of the most infamous crimes occurred in 1928 when 10-year-old Grace Budd disappeared after Fish convinced her parents he was hiring her brother for a job. Instead, he took Grace from her home and killed her. For years, the case went cold, until 1934 the Budd family received a chilling letter. In it, Fish described luring Grace and admitted to cannibalism. The letter was traced back to him, finally leading to his arrest. Investigators soon uncovered a man obsessed with violence, religion, and sexual sadism. Fish freely admitted to other crimes, but often spoke in riddles, leaving many unanswered questions about the true extent of his killing. In 1935, he was convicted of Grace Budd's murder and sentenced to death. On January 16, 1936, Albert Fish was executed in the electric chair at Sing Sing Prison. He was 75 years old. Herman Webster Mudgett, better known as H. Holmes, was born in New Hampshire in 1861. As a child, he was bullied and reportedly developed a fascination with death and dissection after being forced to confront a human skeleton at school. Bright and ambitious, Holmes studied medicine and later moved to Chicago in the late 1880s, where he reinvented himself as a doctor, businessman, and eventually one of America's first known serial killers. In 1887, Holmes purchased a property in Chicago's Englewood neighborhood and began constructing what became infamous as the Murder Castle. Outwardly, it appeared to be a hotel and pharmacy, but inside it contained secret passages, soundproof rooms, trap doors, and a basement equipped for sinister purposes. Investigators later believe Holmes used the building to lure and kill his victims, many of whom were young women who came to Chicago seeking work or lodging during the 1893 World's Fair. Holmes' methods varied. Victims were locked in airtight rooms and suffocated, gassed through hidden pipes, or subjected to medical experiments. Bodies were often sent down chutes into the basement, where Holmes stripped them for skeletons or disposed of them in lime pits. He profited by selling skeletons to medical schools and insurance scams, making his crimes both gruesome and calculated. His downfall began with a failed insurance scheme. In 1894, he was arrested in Boston for fraud. As investigators dug deeper, they uncovered connections to multiple disappearances. When police searched the murder castle, they found evidence of torture chambers and human remains, though the true number of victims remains disputed. Estimates range from 9 confirmed murders to more than 200 suspected. Holmes was convicted of murder and sentenced to death. On May 7, 1896, he was executed by hanging in Philadelphia. His chilling legacy cemented him as one of the earliest and most infamous serial killers in American history.